Recording. We're doing good so far. We got another shot. We're doing good today. All right. Welcome everybody. Today's Wednesday, January 22nd, 2022, and this is my Bible study, and we're back in our weekly Bible study in chapter 13. My apologies about last week. We were supposed to shoot a doubleheader last weekend, but when we took our break, we went out. I had a flat and no spare, and children at the park, so we had to just break until this week. So we're just going to pick it up right where we're at. No biggie. We'll just continue with this week. Chapter 13 is where we are next. With that being said, let's just say, Father, we pray that this finds people have open eyes and open ears. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Now, I want to review chapter 12. Now, chapter 12, we were introduced to the beast for really the first time in the book of Revelation. Then we said we're going to get to what all that really meant when we get to chapter 13, which now where we are at. But I want you to remember that it was 7 heads and had 10 horns. Just keep that imagery in your mind. 7 heads and 10 horns, all these things mean things. We're going to find out what they are tonight. Okay. Now this tonight is also going to be a BEV, and it's going to be called The Beast of the Book of Revelation, because that's really what we're getting into tonight, and what it is and how it affects you and the timelines that it follows. And that's where we're going to start tonight, is with the timeline. Almost everybody understands that we're talking about a 7-year period, but why is what I want to kind of get into. And most of that, among other places, most of it comes out of the book of Daniel. Now, when you start studying the book of Revelation, you cannot help but talk somewhat about Daniel, because the book of Daniel is just the book of Revelation in the Old Testament. It's really what it is. Okay, now here in Daniel we have something that's called the 70 weeks prophecy out of the book of Daniel. Well, here, chapter 9, verse 27, all right, we're focused on the week that the Antichrist appears in prophecy, okay? Now, if you study the whole prophecy, you know then that these weeks are not the weeks of days, but they're weeks of years. Each day of the week is one full year in the prophecy, okay? So that's one of the places that we get, and here's what it says, all right? And he, speaking of the Antichrist, shall confirm the covenant. Let me get this zoomed in where I can see. With many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. I'm going to stop right there for just a second. Now, sacrifice and the oblation, we've talked a little bit about this before in other Bible studies. When we talked about Elijah, when it was his turn, after the Baal priests did their thing, he waited until he found the old altar. He rebuilt it with native stones that he named after each one of the tribes, okay? And he waited until the time for the evening sacrifice. Well, that's what this is talking about. Okay, and now when Christ resurrected, he became all those sacrifices. So here we're actually talking about communion, because that's about the only thing that'd be left with that. So just kind of keep that in mind. But I want you to focus on this in the middle of this week. In the midst of the week is when he makes his appearance. Now I want to look at the graph. Where is it? Where did I put it? Oh, right next to it. All right. And we're going to lay a little bit of this out just as we go, okay? Now, Daniel's week, where the whole dark, heavy line is the whole tribulation period from front to back, okay? And this is Daniel's week, all right? We just talked about this as a 7-year period, which you see graphed at the top, okay? Now, that's how we start to lay this out. So we have a 7-year period that can be referred to as a week in Daniel's prophecy, okay? What's another name that we come up with for this 7-year period? We've already studied it in chapter 3.
Hour of temptation.
Yeah, the hour of temptation, correct. All right, and where we find that is in Revelation chapter 3, verse 10. Remember, here in chapter 3, we're in the Church of Philadelphia, only one of the 2 churches that Christ has no fault with on the first day of the millennium. So it's important to remember that. Listen to what it says. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all of the world. All of the world. Why? To try them that dwell upon the earth. All right, it's a trial. Now, did he just say you were going to be skipped a trial? No. what you're going to be skipped, what you're going to be kept away from is the hour of temptation. Okay, now this hour of temptation was a reference to the entire period of time, okay? But I wanted to draw that out. It's not the trial, all right, but it's the temptation that's removed. And the reason why is because it will recognize the Antichrist as the Antichrist and not the Messiah. So therefore, he is not tempting to you. So therefore, you're spared the temptation. All right, like I said, but not the trial. Now think about this trial. It's a trial, well, okay, it's a test, but you have a copy of the test. So if you failed, it's your fault for not studying for the test, is my point. Okay? Nonetheless, here we're called to hour of temptation, and of course we got that graph there, right under 7-year period. Now, remember in chapter 8, we also had another reference to the time. Since the whole thing is the hour of temptation, remember chapter 7 seal? Revelation chapter 8, verse 1, almost. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven.
That was why.
Right, about the space of half an hour. So then that gets stuck on our graph over here. And we have silence in heaven about the half. Since the hour of temptation is the whole thing, half of that period, which is also the middle of Daniel's week.
3.5 years, yeah.
Right, so it's 3.5 years. Right. Okay, so you start to see how this begins to build then. Seems to be a super focus on the central point of Daniel's week, the midpoint. All right, so kind of keep that in mind. Now, what are some other ways that we've already discovered, other than a half an hour, to refer to the second half then of the temptation period? We went over in chapter 11, if you remember. It's chapter 11, verse 1, and it reads this. And there was given to me a reed like unto a rod, and an angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple, leave it out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be trodden under foot 42 months. Okay, now, 42 months is equivalent to 3.5 years. Now, remember, we're dealing with moons here, so we're talking about the lunar cycle, so this applies to Lucifer and the locust army, and all those things that pertain to that. Now look at the next verse, though, in verse 3. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. 1,260 days is 3.5 years, or 42 months. So you can see just from those, we go back up to our little graph again, and you can see from that we have several ways that we're actually referring to that central point of Daniel's week. On the one hand, the 2 prophets are spoken of on the solar scale in days, and they have 1,260 days. But the locust army, and controlled by the Antichrist himself, they have 42 months as an equivalent time, or an approximate equivalent time. All this can also be referred to as Daniel's week, or the 7 years of tribulation, or the hour of temptation. All these things combined together focus on the central point of the tribulation period in general. That's what I want to get. Now we laid out some times. It's all graphed there on that. Now we're going to build off that as we start to actually study chapter 13. Now here in chapter 13, we're going to do something that if you're actually at home and you're following around in your Bible, you're going to have to keep up. But we're going to stay pretty much in 13 and in 17. So just go to chapter 17 and put some kind of a marker in place and flip back to 13, because we're going to compare this beast with the beast that's in chapter 7, or in chapter 17. All right. Now remember what it looked like in chapter 12 too, all right, because here we have it repeated again. Chapter 13, verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. So you have several things. You have a beast, you have water, you have the heads, the horns, and then of course the names of blasphemy. All right, now flip over to chapter 17. All right, at the very top, so let's pick it up just in verse 3. I think I got a little more than that in there, but let's pick it up there. This is so he carried me away in the spirit in the wilderness. This is John, of course. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet beast. Remember in chapter 12, it was a red dragon. Right? Here we have another red dragon, a scarlet beast, full of names of blasphemy, just like in chapter 13, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, now what I want you to draw from that is these are not two different beasts. All the dressing that goes around these two beasts is just dressing. The core of the beast hasn't changed. It's still the names of blasphemy, the 7 heads, and the 10 horns. All these are consistent symbols that are being used. Okay, let's go ahead and let's just get this out of the way and name some of the symbols so we can understand what's going on in chapter 13. First thing in Revelation 17, verse 5, there's something there I want you to pull out. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and the abomination of earth. This is the woman riding this beast. Okay, I want you to get out of that. It's Babylon is what it's actually talking about. All right? Remember, when you start talking about Babylon now, you're going to be talking about false religion. All false religion comes from Babylon, like we studied before when we studied our Genesis studies, when we started all this.
That was the point of the tower.
Right, that was the point of it. Right, exactly.
To avoid God's wrath.
Yeah, to avoid that at all costs, right. And here, that makes this then a religious beast. This woman is a religious symbol, okay? Because the one in chapter 13 is not religious. And when we get back to 13, I'll draw that out. All right? Now, I want you to go down to the very bottom, because in here, the woman which thou sawest is that great city. That's in verse 18. It reigneth over the kings of the earth. All right? When you go back to verse 15, the waters that thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. All right? And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. Okay, so we have all this, and the 7 heads are 7 mountains, and mountains we've discussed before, studied before, are symbols for nations. Okay, so we have the symbols named outright. Now, it's important not to change them or you're not going to get it. All right, so let's go back here then to chapter 13 in the book of Revelation, remembering what the symbols are then. So what he says is he's standing there and he sees out of the people some kind of a beast rise up out of all the people, which are people that's been from different nations speaking different languages. All right? And they have 7 heads. Well, these 7 heads are nations. They're mountains. All right? And the 10 horns are leaders, kings. All right? And upon his head, 10 crowns. That's the only thing that's different. Now, the crown on the kings means that they just have God's authority to do these things. That's all the difference is. Because this beast now has authority. It didn't have it in the first earth age, but in this one it does. Okay, so it has the authority from God to do these things again. Why? To try those that dwell upon the earth. All right? Okay, let's see what it says about this beast. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Now, think about a leopard. A leopard is an ambush predator. You don't see it coming.
Sleek.
All right. By the time you know it's a leopard, you're already dead. And then you just drag your carcass to the top of a tree and eat it at his leisure. All right? So you see why they pick a leopard then as one of the symbols in there. And his feet were as the feet of a bear. And, when I was in elementary school, I remember hearing stories about the great grizzly bears in North America. Some of these grizzlies were so powerful that they could crush a buffalo skull with one swipe of their hand. All right? And that's exactly the kind of intention that it's trying to convey to you by using a bear. And the mouth as the mouth of a lion. And a lion, of course, kills by asphyxiation. He grabs hold of that throat and hangs on as you begin to die while others begin to consume your body. And so you see these symbols really being really powerful symbols for this. And the dragon, who is the dragon? And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. All right? Now, if you need any help on who the dragon is, I'm going to give it to you. It's in Revelation chapter 20, verse 2. And it says, and he laid hold on the dragon, he being Christ, laid hold on to the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So you have his name actually outright given to you. All right? So you can't change what it is. All right? Verse 3. And I said, okay, here's where it gets kind of interesting. All right? Because this beast is not the religious beast of chapter 17. You didn't say anything about the woman riding it, right? So what we have here is a political beast. Right. It's what rises up out of a sea of people. Our different economic systems, different religious structures, different nations. All these things rise up out of a sea of people. And these nations, what they do is they bind together in an attempt to bring peace to the earth. Now, the thing about this beast is you got to recognize is that many people are going to miss the formation of this beast because when it forms, it has for the first half of Daniel's week, it has no real authority. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because we're getting ready to get into exactly why. Verse 3 is where we are. And I saw one of the heads. Remember what was a head? It was a nation. All right? And I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death. All right? Now, how do you kill a political system? You have one of the nations in the group can withdraw from the system, and that causes it to fall. That's why I say it's weak and it's behind the scenes. It's not going to be something that's in your face. It's going to be it's something that's weak and it's something that's done behind the scenes. Now we're getting ready to find out that the dragon, like you said, has control over this. So that first formation in the first half of Daniel's week, or the first 3.5 year period, is a behind the scenes activity for him because he's not actually present in front of people at this time, but he is the one that is in control of it. Now, what does it say after the one unwounded? And the deadly wound was healed, and all of the world wondered after the beast. Now we're getting somewhere. Verse 4, and they worshiped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. Okay, this point is where the political beast changes from a political beast into a religious beast. It's still the same substructure. It's still the 7 heads. It's all the beast coming up out of the water. All that's still the same. It's just now it's changed. No longer is political. Now it becomes the Whore of Babylon that we were talking about in chapter 17. And that gets more clear now when we go to chapter 17 and actually cover that when we get there. Okay, so now we see that convergent point. Now we have a graph that helps illustrate this pretty good. It should be, I gotta zoom out. Okay, there it is. No, that's not the one I want to talk about. Yeah, up. There we go. Up. And that shows all this. All right. The midweek appearance back to the beginning, we know it's 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years, the Antichrist was working behind the scenes to make this union of 7 nations come into existence. And then when one of them pulls out, that's when you have the midweek appearance of the Antichrist at the 3.5 year mark of the tribulation period. From that point forward, when the people begin to worship the dragon, it ceases to be the political beast, and now it becomes the religious beast of chapter 17. So it's a really kind of an easy concept to follow when you thought kind of in that way.
And the turning point is the dragon.
When the dragon appears,
fixing the political beast
taking power. Exactly. What verse were we on? They worshipped the dragon which gave power to the beast. Right. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? Excuse me. And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue, there's our number again, 40 and 2 months. For a space of 3.5 years, or from the halfway point of the tribulation period to the second advent is actually the time period that you're measuring there, which is 42 months. Now, don't get all bound around that because it's going to change. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit too. Verse 6, and he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God and blasphemed his name and his tabernacle and them that dwelt in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given unto him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. So all that sea of people will fall for this sucker. Except for who? What does it say? In verse 8, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Now, almost every Christian is taught that that is where their name as a Christian resides. But this word is an interesting word in Greek. All right, foundation here is a Greek word katabol. All right, it is used exclusively with the casting in relationship to the casting down of Lucifer, and it actually means to cast down. All right. So what he's saying is there's a book that the Lamb slain wrote before there was even flesh man. All right, and then that book are the names of the people. Now don't get the names of the people that they're talking about here that will testify with the names that can be sealed. Those chosen from before the foundations are not the same. They are sealed, but anybody can be sealed. It's up to them. Anybody can be sealed. Now these people are sealed. But nonetheless, so that's the Lamb's Book of Life. And remember, there are a lot of books, all right? People get really bent around the axle about this. And there's at least one reference that doesn't associate the Book of Life with the foundation. So maybe saying that there's actually another Lamb's Book of Life that contains all the Christian names. That's not a problem. But this is not it. This is the one chosen from the katabol, from the casting down of Lucifer. All right? And if any man have an ear, let him hear. Verse 10, and he that letteth in captivity shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. Now, I know I have a note here that says second beast, but this really is not the second beast. We've been talking about the dragon, the Antichrist. Well, listen to the description of this guy, because this is just recapping and showing you more about what it looks like when he makes that midweek appearance, okay? Listen to what it says. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. Did it say it was out of the sea? Did it say it was a part of the structure of the political system of the flesh man? No. Came up out of the earth. Why? It's because there's silence in heaven at this point, because he is here on the earth. He's not a product of the people of the sea. And he had what? He had two horns like a lamb. Could look just like the lamb slain, if you're not careful. But when he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast, which was the political system, with the dragon in control of it. But now he's assuming the mantle of Antichrist instead of Jesus. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. All right. The fire from heaven, we've talked about this, so we're talking about lightning. So he's saying that he'd be able to snap his fingers and draw lightning. Now, there was another one that was Elijah, remember? When we studied the two prophets, well, Elijah's one of those two prophets, and he was one of those prophets that called down fire from heaven, if you remember. So I can't imagine the dynamic that's going to develop in that last time period between these two, with both of them having that kind of and then both of them will be able to do these signs and these things in the sight of man. So it's going to cause all kind of havoc. And because of this, because of those two prophets, they'll be hated amongst all people, because they're messing up their gum works with their risen Messiah theory being here on earth. Oh, I needed a drink. Where were we? Inside of man, verse 14. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles, which he hath power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image of the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. Now, people make a big deal about this, but this image is can be nothing more than a flag, a standard.
Yeah.
And we see images right now. You're seeing an image on TV.
A tattoo.
Right. I mean, so there's a lot of things that could be
tons of
images.
stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Could be a necklace that you wear.
Right, but some way to identify. Right. The image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. All right. But remember chapter 9.
Can't kill us.
He can't kill anybody, right? He can't kill anybody.
Can't create and he can't kill.
That's right. And if he kills the men, that's what he messes up with the two prophets, if you remember. He
Yeah.
kills the two prophets.
kills
now he's accepted over his limits.
Yep.
All right.
And now it's
And that's when the end
revelation, yeah.
comes, right? That's right. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand and on their forehead. And now, man, we have worked this mark before we got here, backwards and forwards. You understand exactly what it means. All right, for the benefit of all you that may be on Facebook, I know it's a very popular idea that this is some mark like a microchip or a tattoo or something like that. But if you do your Old Testament legwork, you're going to find out that all that is saying that you were supposed to take the Word of God and place it in your forehead, and that would be evidence in your labor. Okay? And this is exactly the same thing. This mark is not a physical mark. It's just a mark. If you believe the appearance of the Messiah, or the appearance of the Antichrist at midpoint of Daniel's week, then you bear the mark of the beast. And it will be evidenced in your labor, because you will be doing things to further that along, because you believe that Christ is here and among you, among us. See, and when you start to talk about it being a tattoo and a microchip, you move away from what the biblical understanding of it is, and then when it happens, you miss it. So if you don't agree with it, that's fine. Just file it away in your brain and remember it when it happens. That's the best advice I can give. All right? And that no man might buy or sell, save he that hath the mark. All right? So we've been up and down this too. All right? Or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And now here we get into this big spooky voodoo stuff. All right? But listen to what it says in 18. Here's wisdom. Okay. Now, what I want to tell you about wisdom is almost never a complicated idea. Wisdom is almost always simplistic, okay, and it's almost common sense. All right, it doesn't get fancy. So listen to what wisdom says. Let him that hath understanding count. I'm gonna lock that into your mind. Count, all right, the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. Now people go nuts and tell you, I see right there, it says the Antichrist is a man. Well, let me tell you something. We were mankind before there was flesh man. Gabriel is referred to as the man of God. That's what his name means. Okay? So an individual in their spiritual body is still man. And that's what Lucifer is. He will not be born of the womb. If he's born of the womb, he has a chance for redemption. And he has already been convicted and sentenced to death in Ezekiel chapter 28. All right? So therefore, it's contradictory to think that. And listen to what it says. And his number is 666. Well, that's your 666. Now, it's not 666. It's 6. It's another 6. And it's another 6. Now, I want you to look at the little diagram right below it. All right. What does it say? It says count. In the simplest terms, to enumerate. So, what is the book of Revelation? It's mostly seals, trumpets, and vials. All right. So count. Seal 1, trumpet 1, vial 1. Seal 2, trumpet 2, vial 2. 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6. All right. The 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 6th vial is the number 666. And all that means is all 6 of those, all 3 elements will all be done completely before the 7th. 7 means biblical numeric, spiritual completeness. Right. It's a nice, easy one. And it's right there in your face. All right. So before spiritual completeness at 777, you have to deal with all 6 of the seals, all 6 of the trumpets, and all 6 of the vials. All right. And then comes spiritual completeness. All right. Now that is what wisdom means. Wisdom simply means to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 comes before 7. Right. The book of Revelation is that simple. It's not complicated. And that just sums up all that. Now, we started all this with it being with the timeline that we've got. Now I'm going to blow it all apart. Because we got to make a little bit of an adjustment. And you'll find that adjustment here on the website. It says timeline correction, Revelation chapter 9. And I want to look at this. We're going to look at this as a previous chart. If you want to look at it, that's fine. Blow it up here so we can get a good shot of it. All right. Let's see what it says, okay? Because chapter 9.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Chapter 9, it tells you what the time period was shortened to, okay? Now, God promises that because of the elect's sake that he will shorten this time, the overall time period of the tribulation period. But to what? Now, Revelation chapter 9 tells you exactly, it tells you exactly to what. We're going to pick it up in verse 4, and we're going to look at 4 verses here in chapter 9. All right? Chapter 9, verse 4. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth. This is talking about the locust army. That comes up out of the pit, if you remember. Neither any green thing, neither any tree. So you know this is not locusts because they're doing, or not locusts because they're doing what's not, something that's unnatural for a locust to do. All right? They can't touch anything green. All right? But only those men which have not the seals of God in their forehead. So the only person they can mess with are the people that are not sealed with God's seals. All right? And to them it was given that they should not kill them. Can't kill anybody. All right? But they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. Of course, we talked a little bit about that when we covered this in verse 9, or in chapter 9. All right, now, later on, it gives you that 5-month period. Now, that whole point, that whole thing is reduced. Now, that's the only thing, is time. The events all still happen. It's just the time that's been reduced. And it says it a second time in chapter 9, the second time for emphasis. So when it's repeated, it's being emphasized. And here it's repeated within 10, 11 verses. It's repeated twice. Now in verse 10, listen to what it says of chapter 9. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stingers in their tails, and their power was to hurt man. Did it say kill? No, but to hurt man 5 months. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue his name is Apollyon. Those are 2 words used to describe only one entity named Lucifer. Okay, you don't get an A, B, or C on this. That's just who he is. All right? And it clearly states twice then that they have 5 months. So then let's go up here and let's adjust that for what then we've learned, because it still kind of applies, but you just got to make the adjustment for time with it, okay? So Daniel's week now, instead of being a 7-year period, now is a 5-month period, all right? That 5-month period is still referred to as the hour of temptation, and we still have that half hour of silence in heaven, all right? But now, that time period has been removed from the midpoint to 2.5 months. So, from the time that the political beast forms and becomes active, will function for 2.5 months before one head is wounded to death. That triggers the appearance then of the Antichrist, and then the rest of the tribulation period continues on from that point forward. Now, this is the midpoint. He only can reign for 2.5 months before you have the second advent coming on, full on. All the 7s are rolling, okay? Now, you won't even be able to bear the mark of the beast until the midpoint of Daniel's week. That means from the midpoint, the appearance of the Antichrist, to the appearance of the actual Messiah is only 2.5 months. Okay? Now, I know the people who live around this area. If they recognize who this guy is, they will have no problem surviving probably a pretty lush manner for 2.5 months off the grid. It just is the way it is, okay? Especially when you know it's going to happen ahead of time.
Especially when you got groups of people like us that are
That's
working
right.
together.
That's right. And people,
I can't trade with the free world because I can trade with my
trade with others, right?
fellows.
Okay, now I hope that helps clear this up. Because I know there's a lot of confusion because you read about these beasts and it sounds pretty scary.
Yeah.
Now, in my life, I've heard preachers preach that there will be this animal come up out of the ocean and start ripping cities apart, killing people. Right? All these things are just a matter. It's more like Cinderella. You know, it's Cinderella, right? Yeah, right, exactly. It's all metaphors. And the thing with the symbol, with the biblical symbol, is it stays consistent from front to back, from Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation. God doesn't change, then neither does the way He lays out His symbols. Right, right.
I mean, yeah.
That's right. It's exactly. It doesn't change. But okay, that's the BEV for the Beast of the Book of Revelation. Next week we'll be back with chapter 14, and we'll see where we go from there. We may do 2. I don't know. It just depends how chapter 14 goes. But on one thing, I hope you learned something. And you guys all have a good night.
Thank you.
Finish. That's what it was. Hold on now. Okay, I did this wrong last time. Privacy. Lexicon watched your video. Well, thank you. She doesn't understand a word of it. She only speaks Marshallese. That is public. No, we want it to be public. There we go. That's public. Friends. No, we want it to be public. We want everything to be public, dude. It's a public. Okay, next.
His sister been commenting on my shit.
Oh, has she? Well, yeah, 30 days. Post.
Of course.
Which one was she commenting on?
Just
Of the
stupid
other
post
one?
from.
Oh.